Doctor James Mack's maternal ancestry. Stevenson family connection. As has been detailed in earlier Mack family stories, DJ's father, George Washington Byrd, was killed in 1863 while fighting for the Confederacy during the Civil War. DJ was 2 years old when he was killed. DJ's mother, Charlotte, passed around 1865 at the end of the Civil War when he was 4 years old. DJ Byrd's paternal ancestry has been traced back to the year 1066 in England, but little to nothing has been written about his maternal ancestry. With this story, we will begin to fill in the blanks. A well-known story about DJ's life was written by his daughter Evelyn, who was known as Aunt Miss, in 1955. The story goes that his stepmother, Mary Stevenson, raised DJ as a white child as though he was her own son. Charlotte. Aunt Miss wrote that DJ's mother's name was Charlotte. The question that many of DJ's descendants have wondered about was why would the widow of his father raise the enslaved son of her maid's daughter, whom he had a relationship with? Was her heart simply that big and kind? This was Aunt Miss's conclusion and has been the belief of many, if not all of us. Well, our latest research indicates that the answer is more complicated than that. When Mary's father, Jephthah, passed away in 1840, he willed 5 named enslaved to each of his children. One of the enslaved was DJ's grandmother, Hannah, whom he willed to his daughter Mary, who married George Byrd. The Will of Jephthah Stevenson. South Carolina, in the name of God, Amen. I, Jephthah Stevenson, of Darlington District, State and District above named, being on the decline in health, but of perfect mind and memory, calling to mind that it is appointed to man once to die, and then to judgment, do make and ordain this my last will and testament according to the following manner. Jephthah's will continued. Fourth, I will and give unto my daughter Nancy Salisbury 1 negro girl named Harriet, her and an increase to go to the issue of the body of my daughter Nancy Salisbury at her death. Fifth, I will and give unto my daughter Bavaria Jones 1 negro girl named Verity. Sixth, I will and give unto my daughter Sarah Sammons, and to the issue of her body at her death 1 negro girl named China, and her increase. Seventh, I will and give unto my son Thomas 1 negro boy named Daniel. I will and give unto my daughter Mary 1 negro girl named Hannah. Stevenson family connection. Hannah gave birth to DJ's mother, Charlotte, in 1844. Mary married George Washington Byrd in 1852 and gave birth to their only son, Redden, in 1856. In 1860, Charlotte gave birth to George's second son, DJ. But who was Charlotte's father? DNA has confirmed what I long suspected. Thomas Stevenson, Mary's only brother, was Charlotte's father. Census records show that after his father passed, Thomas was the man of the house in 1840 and in 1850. Hannah was Mary's maid and therefore probably lived in or spent most of her time working in the house. This gave Thomas plenty of opportunity to have his way with Hannah. Because Hannah was enslaved by Mary, then she would have taken Hannah and Charlotte with her to George's house when they were married in 1860. George was able to have his way with 16-year-old Charlotte. Jephthah DNA MRC. The diagram to the right shows that Jephthah is the most recent common ancestor between a DNA cousin descended from his daughter Nancy and Elizabeth, who descended from his son. Did Mary love or care for DJ? As his grand-aunt and stepmother, Mary probably loved DJ. In addition, he and his brother looked alike. According to Aunt Miss, he was even a little lighter than his brother Redden. This would make sense since they both had genes from the Bird and Stevenson sides of the families. Mary was there when DJ was born. She was there in 1863 when DJ's father passed, and she was there in 1865 when his mother passed. She and Hannah was all he had. She raised him from birth to young adulthood. She couldn't send him to school since it was against the law and would force her to tell the truth. So she taught him to read and write at home. Mary's love continued. She even came to his house shortly after he was married to show his wife, Hattie G., how to care for DJ when he fell ill. In the 1880 census, Mary and DJ's grandfather Thomas are living next to DJ, Hattie, and Columbus. His grandfather Thomas passed away in 1886. It is very likely that Mary continued to live next to DJ and his family until he moved to St. Stephen's in 1892. Mary may even have lent or gave DJ the money to buy the 25 acres of land in St. Stephen's. Mary passed away 5 years later in 1897. She had been closely involved with DJ for his first 32 years of life. In her will, she left everything to two adopted children, one who became the mayor of Lake City. This is another sign of her big heart. Stevenson family in 1880. This census picture shows DJ and family living next to his grandfather Thomas Stevenson, who is living with his grand-aunt Mary. In addition, there are 4 branches of the Nancy Sainsbury family who also descend from Jephthah. Yes, Mary Stevenson Bird was a very caring person and probably loved DJ. Charlotte's paternal tree. Charlotte Mack, 1840 to 1865. Thomas Stevenson, 1812 to 1886. Jephthah Stevenson, 1780 to 1840, and his wife, Mary Courtney, 1785 to 1852. Where did the name Mack come from? Another major question that many descendants of DJ have asked is, where did DJ get the name Mack from? Most often, freed enslaved took the name of their enslaver. This gave them a connection to their past, or, in some cases, provided them with an ally in cases where the law or another white person challenged their freedom or rights. But sometimes they selected their own surname to break away from their enslavers. In this case, I was unable to find any enslavers in Effingham with the surname Mack in either 1840, 1850, or 1860. Then he must have selected his name to turn away from the enslavers, as Aunt Miss stated in her story. My best guess is that he was told that his mother's and grandmother's surname was Mack, and in embracing his new identity, he took their name. But when did his, but when did his, but where did his grandmother get the name from? To find the answer, I returned to Jephthah Stevenson, who had enslaved his grandmother. In 1840, we find Jephthah living with his wife, his 13-year-old daughter Mary, and his 28-year-old son Thomas on their small farm with 10 enslaved people. Please recall that Jephthah willed 5 enslaved people, one to each of his children. My suspicion was that some or all of the 5 may have been related. There were also 2 adult males and a female enslaved who could have been their parents. I then researched Ancestry I then searched Ancestry records for blacks with the last name Mack and the first name of any of the 5 willed enslaved living in Effingham, South Carolina during the Civil War. After the Civil War, I found 2 of the enslaved blacks in the 1880 federal census. Where did the name Mack come from? Using the DNA search engine, I was able to find current day DNA cousins of Aunt Liz, or Lala as some of you like to call her, with the surname Mack. These cousins descended from the 2 Macks I found in the 1880 census. The names were Daniel Henry Mack and China Mack Ham. I was unable to find any records for Hattie or Ferrety, so they may have passed away before bearing children. The DNA strongly suggests that they are siblings and children of a yet unknown common ancestor with the surname Mack. He is DJ's grandfather. Hannah and her siblings. The above shows that Elizabeth Lala, is a DNA cousin to 5 descendants of Daniel, 12 of Hannah, and 12 of China. Daniel Henry Mack, Hannah Mack, and China Mack. China Mack Ham. This 1880 census shows Frank and China Mack Ham and 7 family members. Note, Aunt Liz mentioned about 10 years ago that relatives with the last name Ham came to visit in the 1940s when she was a little girl. In the 1880 census, we also found Daniel living in Effingham with his wife Jane and 9 of his children and his sister-in-law. They're only 10 miles away from DJ's farm. Lawyer Mack. This census shows a Lawyer Mack and family living 2 farms away from DJ. He's thought to be the uncle who had to tell DJ that he wasn't white, but there is no confirmation that they are related. Lawyer and Amy Mack. In the 1900 census, we find Lawyer Mack and his family, and Amy Mack, Frederick, and her family living in Effingham, South Carolina. Charlotte's maternal tree. Charlotte Mack, 1840 to 1865, Hannah Mack, 1825 to 1880, and 2 unknown Macks, father and mother. Mack. So where did the surname Mack come from? We still do not know, but we do know that it was a name that was passed down through the generations. Going back to around 1830, we also know that they did not take the name Stevenson, who was then slaver, and that known slavers named Mack have been found in Effingham in 1840, 1850, or 1860. Despite being separated in the 1840s, they all held on to the name Mack from the 1840s to the end of the Civil War when they could name themselves. Even though they were separated as children, they returned to that birth name and have passed it down to hundreds of Mack descendants now over 150 years later. That is the strength of family. Charlotte's tree. Charlotte Mack, 1840 to 1865. Maternal branch, Thomas Stevenson, 1812 to 1886. Jephthah Stevenson, 1780 to 1840. And Mary Courtney, his wife, 1785 to 1852. And the maternal branch, Hannah Mack, 1825 to 1880. And 2 unknown Macks, the father and mother. Written by Arthur L. Holmes, researched by Arthur L. Holmes, slideshow and video by Arthur L. Holmes II.